Welcome to the podcast, The Creative Unlearning, with your host, Kieran, where we explore all the lessons we've been taught about creativity that are standing in our way and begin to make art on our own terms.
Hello, and welcome to a new season of my newly named podcast, The Creative Unlearning. The reason for the renaming is because I have a new book called The Creative Unlearning. It's out today. It's available instantly as a digital download. And it was written because I found that the role of the artist and the part we play in our creativity is greatly impacted, and in a lot of cases it's really hindered from all the conditioning we've received about what it means to be an artist and what our artistic processes should look like. And my hope for the book was to allow artists to see that removing and unlearning our conditioning is a way out of creative confinement. We can then begin to explore and uncover for ourselves what it means for us to be an artist and what we want our creative journeys to look like. There is no one size fits all when it comes to artists. And given we live in an industrialized capitalist model of society, we can be forgiven for all the conditions we've been told about what it means to create art, how we should be doing it, and if we should be doing it at all. So the book was a way to uncover some of these conditioned ideas and break them apart, and then ask you through journal prompts at the end of each chapter to reflect on your take on your experiences and how they've shaped you and are shaping you as an artist. Because I want us to understand that we're in a position of choice. We get to choose how we want to be as an artist, what we want to create and how we want to create it. And we don't have to be told what that entails. So the book was a way to uncover some of these beliefs, and I wanted the podcast to accompany the conversations within the book and expand on them, and to continue the excavation of creativity and the reclaiming of it back to the artists. We don't need to be told how to be artists and what our lives should look like. We don't need social media channels to show us what a day in the life of an artist looks like, when we're all being fed generic messages and images that ultimately mold us into one homogenous group, which we're far from. So the book and the podcast is an invitation to question everything that we've been taught and instead ask ourselves what we know in our hearts and stop outsourcing our artistic intuitions to the opinions of others. Because when we take a look, we want to see what we've been shown by the outside world. Who shows us how to be artists? Where do we see images of them? What do we hear about them? What are the main narratives that surround us about them? And it's all to do with the starving artist, cutting off ears, tormented, turning to substance abuse to be able to channel the negative feelings through our art. It's all dark and dismal. And there is a story about artists that isn't inspiring, but is kind of just frightening. A narrative that actually deters us from heading in that direction. Telling people they'll be poor, internally tormented. None of that is an incentive to make art. And I don't know, maybe that was the aim, to put people off being artists, put people off thinking for themselves, stepping out of the confines and conformities of society, so that we do as we're told and we're obedient. Whereas art derives from a whole other space, not of conformity or restriction, but expansion and exploration. And we as artists can't be contained in labels, myths, and stereotypes. We can be anything we wish to be, however we wish to be it. So our idea of being artists are as unique as our own art. Our lives will impact the art we make and how we make it. And we're not meant to fit into a neatly prescribed idea of what an artist should be or look like. Because for my own journey on my road to becoming an artist, I knew nobody that was actually making art full time or did it as their profession. It was a complete fantasy. You know, I was a South Asian woman born into a working class family of parents who came to the UK in the 60s. There was no concept of becoming an artist, and it wasn't an ideal career path for parents who'd worked hard to create educational opportunities for their kids. But I did become an artist, and my parents were ahead of their time and may not have understood my hopes and ambitions, but they didn't stand in the way of them. And the very freedoms that they fought for were somehow represented in me doing what I chose to do and brought me to the path of being an artist. And along that path, what did I have to unlearn along the way? And it's pretty much everything. My origins, my ethnicity, my gender, the class system, the era I was raised in, none of it taught me that I could be an artist. It taught me quite the opposite. The elitism that surrounds art and its familiar homes, such as galleries and exhibitions, were just more areas where gatekeepers previously resided. So it was an unravelling of the conditioning doled out that needed to be taken apart and discarded for me to even begin to explore the notion of becoming an artist. You know, what my life would look like ultimately, how many ways I wouldn't fit into society, and everything I'd have to unlearn. And ultimately, in that unlearning, what comes about is a true acceptance of ourselves as artists and humans as we are. It's learning to be how we know we are and listening to that inner voice, and then having the courage to make art our own way. And really, it means stopping seeking permission from outside forces, to stop waiting for someone else to value what you create and say it's worthy or valuable. It's a silencing, in essence, of all outside noise and a tuning into an internal world which is limitless, timeless, and not confined to rules and regulations. And that's not really how we're taught to live. We're taught quite the opposite, to live within the confines of rules and regulations, to do as we're told, to not listen to our inner voices and be directed by outside voices and forces. And you know, for the longest time after I became a full-time artist, I would still try to organize my day as though I was in a regular job. So I'd still try and relate to others that were in more conventional jobs with a working week or working 8 hours a day. And I would try to fit my artistic process into an 8-hour working day, sitting at a desk, trying to finish at 5 o'clock, starting at 9, having weekends off. And none of that fitted into my desires to be an artist or the way I made art. None of it. It didn't inform it, it didn't inspire it, and it didn't cultivate any kind of fruition for my creative practice. I had to go against those ideas to form my own rituals, my own days, organize my time, to feed into my art and to create from that space. You know, I even fell for the idea that making art wasn't hard and it didn't take up energy. I went along with a consensus that isn't it wonderful and an easy experience, and that I just needed to be grateful that I was doing it because I wasn't doing a quote unquote real job. And it kind of makes me sad and angry now when I think back to it, because not only is it a colossal lie, it's also degrading to all the work that's involved in making art. It takes away the level of commitment, discipline, and skill inherent in creating, and it diminishes it at the best to the confines of like a childlike hobby that's unrealistic, and it's so easy to do that children do it for play. When we take the time to question everything we've learned about being artists, we see that there's negative undertones everywhere. You know, I've lost count of the times I've heard statements said to me such as, "Oh, you're so lucky you don't have to go to work," or, "Oh, I could do that," or, "My child loves drawing. What's your real job?" It's okay for you. You don't have to deal with the pressures of a real job. Are you just going to paint pretty patterns all day long? And it must be lovely just to paint all day and not have to work. And when you break apart these statements that people feel so free to disperse of, it's a combination of passive aggression, it's patronizing, condescending, and it's not even investigated. People just assume these things about artists and their work and then espouse them as if they're truths. And what amazes me is that all the words that we love to read in our favourite books, or the music that accompanies us throughout our lives and triggers memories for us, or the art we see and choose to hang in our homes, is all the work of artists who are seen as members of society that have unrealistic notions of life And yet these creations have made everybody's lives richer, and we wouldn't be without them. We're sold the idea that art is like superfluous to our basic needs, but is it really? Can we imagine a world without art of any kind? Just concrete, generic buildings with no interiors, no music, no books, no dance, no sculpture or poetry. Can you imagine how empty of colour life would look like? And yet these artistic endeavours are so flippantly brushed aside as if they're not real work and of little value. And I think that making art and having artists in the world is of incredible importance, not just because the world does actually need us, but it's also because we as artists are needed to bring a different perspective into the world. And a way of shining light on them is through our art, and that's the way we connect and resonate with one another. It's a communication that's formed in other realms and then brought into this one. It's vital, it's alive, and we need more of it and more acknowledgement of artists and the value and worth that they bring and their creations bring into the world. So my new book and the new podcast are the tips of the iceberg, and this is a conversation that I want to continue to dive into, to explore and excavate, because the unlearning is an ongoing process, just as creating is. There is no final destination. I think as long as we're creating, there's alongside it an element of unlearning as we go. Now, to celebrate the release of the new book, I'm giving away a free 1-hour coaching call with me. To enter the draw, just sign up to my art letter, and I will choose the lucky winner on Friday, the 23rd of August, 2024.
Thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.